there is no enemy. So, but we'll all hash everything out at the table all together. NATO, they said, even they'll relegate to a political organization. And the CSCE, or the Partnership for Peace, they will take the forefront. And Russia and Ukraine and Belarus and the Baltics and everyone will all be involved from the beginning. That way there's nothing to fight about. Neutrality's baked in. But they weren't ever going to really do that, right? That was essentially a ruse. That was what they sold the Russians, first the Soviets, then the Russians, to get them to acquiesce and say, okay, fine, I guess you can allow Germany to reunite. And okay, fine, you get Yeltsin drunk enough, you'll get him to mutter that I guess he doesn't object too much if Poland joins NATO and this kind of thing. And so then they keep going forward. But the idea always was, to paraphrase one of the first leaders of NATO, Lord Ismay from Great Britain, said that the purpose of NATO is to keep America in, Germany down, and the Soviets out. And so
America in, Germany down, and the Soviets out.
That's right. So it's not the Soviets now, it's just the Russians. But it's to prevent, as James Baker put it to Gorbachev when they were haggling over the promises about whether to expand NATO or not, whether they would expand NATO or not. He says to Gorbachev, he goes, listen, I mean, you want us still here, right? You don't want an independent Germany with its own nuclear weapons and its own foreign policy. And Gorbachev said, actually, James Baker, you make a real good point, right? Even after this is during the Cold War still, right? Or, it's still the Soviet Union, the communists. And they're saying, yeah, we prefer America to the Germans, even though we could have nuked them off the face of the earth. We never did. But the Germans did everything but that to them twice. And so they're saying, yeah. And that's, of course, what England wants too, is for America to be the dominant power in Europe so that Germany's not. And in fact, it probably reassures the Poles and the French too, that like when America is the balancer on the continent, it means nobody else can be. And they don't have to fight over it all the time the way they always have, which is fine until the American people go completely bankrupt and all have to live in their car in the Walmart parking lot. And then at some point, somebody's going to have to figure out something else.
Is it possible that, I know you said this arrogance was one of the reasons, or the main reason they didn't accept Russia to join NATO, but is it possible that they saw Russia as a potential threat? So like they needed to keep it weak so it does not become an enemy later on. It doesn't become a Cold War rival in the future.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Is by threat, they just mean powerful enough to remain independent from us. Does anybody think Russia's really coming to Berlin or to Paris or to Washington or to Spokane? The other Washington, right? No, they're not. That nobody thinks that. The question is just whether, we are going to be able to completely freeze them out of Caspian oil resources, or whether they're going to get a pipeline too, right? Whether we're going to be able to bring Ukraine into our military alliance, or whether that's a bridge too far, pal. These are the questions that we're talking about, right? We're not talking about them going anywhere else. We're talking about just how far can America push it before this thing blows up and a bunch of people get killed, which is what we're watching in Ukraine now.
When do you think Russia realized that they'll never get a chance to join NATO?
Oh, I think Putin knew that pretty early on. He asked in July of 2001, and Colin Powell blew him off. And I think he may have asked W. Bush again in 2002. But he understands. He's a sharp enough guy to see that, look, they're not going to do that. There's too much at stake. And then, I never really thought about it this way, but of course, this makes a lot of sense. I should have thought about this myself, which is, and I didn't mention this in my book because I didn't think of it till the other day, but there's a lot of things on the list, But Larry Johnson, the former CIA officer, pointed out to me it's the obvious thing, right? It's the purloined letter. I should have thought of this. It's sitting right there. Putin opposed the invasion of Iraq. He's sitting on the UN Security Council. And if he'd supported the invasion of Iraq, he could have probably got China to go along and at least abstain. But it was clear that Russia and probably China would vote no, which is a veto, right? It has to be unanimous to get a UN Security Council resolution through. The French may have vetoed it anyway. But that Vladimir Putin was not helpful on Iraq War II. That pissed them off, man. They were so sure how right they were during that time, man. It's hard to recreate the spirit of that time, that like you could see how they would have really reacted angrily when they found out that, man, the Russians are immovable on this. And they wouldn't have to participate. They just have to legalize it by voting in the Security Council to do it. And instead, they left it an illegal, aggressive war under the law, even though it was regardless of the law. But you understand what I mean.
But that was after the 2001 Colin Powell brushing him off. So Putin's already brushed off. So that's probably why he voted no on the Iraq invasion and he didn't play ball. Because even in Afghanistan, he was a lot more supportive. He was the first one to call the president at 9/11. So he still, at least from the outside, you look at it, he still had hope.
I think he might have voted against. I think he might have tried to stop the war with Iraq anyway. He's a smart enough guy. Iraq is, if you're from Texas, like W. Bush is nominally from Texas. Iraq might as well be that cartoon in Aladdin, right? It's a make-believe place to W. Bush. He didn't know the first thing about it. He said, what is all this talk about Sunnis and Shiites? I thought they were all Muslims. And that was right before the war, okay? This is just an imaginary place. Yes, he said that. This might as well have been the dark side of Mars to W. Bush. But to Vladimir Putin, he understood good and well what Iraq was and what it's going to be. If you go all the way to Baghdad and do a violent regime change there, boy, you can see the dominoes that are going to fall down. All you had to do was really know the first thing about it, right? That starting that war was for people who don't know the first thing about it. Anybody who did knew better than to do that.
The people that were by George Bush's side, they kind of convinced him to start that war. They knew what could happen. They've seen what happened in Iran. They've seen what happened in Iraq prior to that. So they probably knew what they were into. They were very ambitious. They were very optimistic about what they could achieve.
Yeah, they had very detailed plans about how it's supposed to work, which of course completely backfired. And I say this every day, but I urge your audience to read The Clean Break. It's from 1996. It's by David Wormser, the important neoconservative apparatchik. And it's called A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm, which he wrote for Netanyahu. And the idea was that they want to steal the rest of Palestine. They want to cancel Oslo. They want to not do a two-state solution at all. Forget that. We're going to colonize the rest of Palestine. But the problem is Hezbollah on our northern border. So what we want to do is we want to neutralize Iranian support for Hezbollah through Syria by overthrowing Saddam Hussein in Baghdad. What? And now the reason that's supposed to make sense to them was they thought they would get a Hashemite king and that he would use his Mohammedan blood to lord it over the Iraqi Shiites and make the Iraqi Shiite clergy tell Hezbollah to stop being friends with Iran. And then they later replaced that with Ahmed Chalabi, the Iraqi exile, was supposed to be the one to take over. And again, was going to pressure, I guess, the Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani down there in Najaf to tell Nasrallah to stop being friends with Iran and start being friends with Israel. That way the Israelis can finish colonizing all of Palestine. And it was based on this complete idiot thinking by David Wormser and Richard Pearl, who were two of the most powerful neoconservatives, and their reassurances to Bush that, oh yeah, this is going to be great. As Wormser said, if we install a supermajority Shiite government in Iraq, it'll be a nightmare for Iran. But no, stupid. It just put Iran's very best friends in power in Iraq, who didn't even say thank you. They just said get out after we were done fighting the civil war for them in 2003 through 8 there.
We're going to get to the clean break because that's where it gets really confusing. We'll break it down for the audience. We just did. We jumped right into it. I want to go back to, because obviously Ukraine's in the headlines. I want to take a step back and how we got to the Ukraine war. So you had the fall of the Soviet. NATO expanded. They did not let Russia join, which just imagine the world will be in today if Russia was part of NATO. I would like to look at it as, Russia and the US could be allies, would have prevented a war in Ukraine. Maybe I'm wrong. But where did they get it wrong, or did they get it wrong? Did they get Ukraine wrong, or was it part of the plan? How did we get there? What was the plan? Look,
I mean, when I say they're arrogant, I mean, just think of the perfect avatar for all of this. Pick, I guess, which gender you're most sexist against, either Joe Biden or Robert Kagan's wife, Victoria Nuland. Like, these are the two most belligerent, know-nothing, know-it-all, just bat-headed idiots that you could possibly have. Think of John McCain up there on stage, standing next to Ola Tannenbach, the leader of the Social National Party. Right? Get it? The social nationalists. I saw a guy on Twitter joking. He goes, "Yeah, get it? That's like the exact opposite of a national socialist." And there's John McCain up there going, "I'm right. I'm smart. I know what I'm doing." But no, he's not right, and he's not smart, and he doesn't know what he's doing. All right, he's sticking it to Russia. He knows that. But does he really know who Tannibok is? Does he understand the history of Ukraine in any way, the culture of the country, and its severe cultural and regional divisions and any of these things? Does he know or care about any of that? Of course not. Him and Joe Biden, they don't sit around reading books. Imagine, just try to picture like as hard as you can, Joe Biden with a stack of books about Ukraine to read. No, never happened, never could happen. Right. But this is the guy who decides, oh, I know what to do. What we're going to do is whatever I want because I'm so smart and we're doing this thing. And if you look at people like Zbigniew Brzezinski, as I show in the book, after the Maidan Revolution of 2014, Brzezinski, who had been a major hawk, and Henry Kissinger too, they both had been hawks, major advocates of NATO expansion. They both said, oh man, you know what? That's it. We should stop here. Right? With Victoria Nuland driving, this ain't a safe trip. Here's what we should do. We should come up with a special status for Ukraine, like Finland and Austria during the old Cold War, where they are neutral. They're not part of the Warsaw Pact, and they're not part of NATO, not part of Russia's alliance, nor ours. And we let them be a bridge between East and West instead of having a fight over it. So, of course, Ron Paul thought that. And of course, over at Anti-War